My name is Hazel Quinn. I'm 28, and for most of my life, I believed that family meant safety, a place where you could fall and still be caught. But that illusion shattered the day my brother, Evan, moved back home. Dad said it was temporary, but within a week, my bedroom became his. And I was told to move into the laundry room. It wasn't just about a room. It was about being replaced, erased, and silenced. That night, surrounded by the hum of the dryer, I learned that betrayal doesn't always come from strangers. Sometimes the deepest scars are made not by enemies, but by the ones we call family. The smell of coffee and rain always reminds me of home. Or at least, what home used to feel like. That morning, the kitchen window fogged up as I watched raindrops race down the glass. Mom hummed softly while washing dishes, and Dad sat at the table, scrolling through his phone. For a moment, everything looked ordinary, safe. Then Dad cleared his throat. "Evan's coming home today," he said, almost casually, like announcing the weather. My stomach sank. "Coming home?" He nodded. "Just for a while, he needs a place to stay." Mom froze, her hands still in the soapy water. "Again," she whispered. Dad avoided her eyes. "He's family, Diana. We can't turn him away." There it was, that word again. Family. It used to make me feel warm. Now it just made my chest tighten. By evening, Evan arrived, confident, smiling and carrying the same scent of arrogance he always had. He hugged Mom like a long-lost hero and shook Dad's hand as if nothing had ever gone wrong. When his eyes landed on me, his smile faltered just a little. "Still living here, huh, Hazel?" I forced a smile. "Still using people, huh, Evan?" Mom sighed. "Please, not tonight." Dad laughed awkwardly. "Come on, you two. Let's just have dinner like a family." Dinner was a performance. Evan told stories about how the city was rough, how he just needed time to figure things out. Dad listened like a loyal fan. Mom picked at her food, silent as ever. And I counted the seconds until I could leave the table. Later that night, I walked to my room and stopped dead in the hallway. Boxes, my boxes, stacked neatly outside my door. Inside, Evan's suitcase. His clothes hanging in my closet. "Dad," I called out, my voice trembling. He appeared behind me, not meeting my eyes. "Evan needs a proper room, Hazel. You can stay in the laundry room for a while." For a while. Those words echoed like thunder. "Are you serious?" "Don't make this difficult. You work from home, you'll manage." I laughed, a short, bitter laugh. "In the laundry room." Dad's voice hardened. "It's temporary, don't start again." That night, I moved my things into the small square room at the back of the house, the one that smelled like detergent and rusted pipes. The dryer's hum felt like a heartbeat I didn't want. I spread a blanket on the floor, set up my laptop on a small stool, and sat there in silence. The walls were cold. The lights flickered. And my own family slept peacefully down the hall, unaware, or maybe uncaring, that their daughter had been replaced. I stared at the ceiling and whispered to myself, "This is not forever." But deep down, I already knew nothing about this was temporary. Days turned into weeks. Evan made himself comfortable, taking over the TV, eating whatever he wanted, and even borrowing my laptop once without asking. Dad defended him every single time. When I confronted Evan about it, he just smirked. "You've always been dramatic, Hazel. Maybe that's why you're still here." "Still here," I repeated. "You mean in my own home?" He shrugged. "Technically, it's Dad's house. You just exist in it." His words stung more than I wanted to admit. One night, while folding laundry, I overheard him on the phone. He was standing on the porch, voice low, urgent. "Yeah, I'm working on it," he said. "Dad's trusting me again. Just a bit more time. I'll get the money." Money. My heart skipped. I pressed closer to the door, listening. "I told you, I'll pay you back. He doesn't even know yet." I stepped back slowly, my mind racing. He was using Dad, again. Just like the last time, when he'd taken $4,000 from him and disappeared for months. At breakfast the next morning, Dad was cheerful. "Evan's really turning things around," he said. "He's even helping me with some errands." I wanted to scream, "He's lying." But I didn't, not yet. Because if there's one thing I've learned, truth means nothing to people blinded by love. That evening, Mom came into the laundry room quietly. She looked tired, her eyes soft. "You okay, honey?" I smiled weakly. "I'm fine." She sighed. "Your father, he just wants peace. He doesn't see things clearly when it comes to Evan." "I know," I paused, "but peace built on lies doesn't last, Mom." She didn't reply, just touched my shoulder and left. That touch was the only warmth I felt in that house. Later that night, I opened my laptop and started writing. Dates, conversations, things I overheard. Every lie, every manipulation. I didn't realize it then, but that document, that quiet little file saved as Note 01, DocX, was going to become the start of something much bigger. The night I started keeping notes, something inside me changed. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was awareness, the kind that keeps you awake long after everyone else has fallen asleep. From my tiny room, I could hear everything. The doors opening, footsteps, even the faint clicks of Evan's phone at 2 a.m. It was like the house itself was whispering secrets to me. I began to pay attention. One morning, Dad left early for work. Mom had gone to the market. Evan was still asleep, or pretending to be. I quietly stepped into the living room and noticed a stack of envelopes on the coffee table. Bills, bank notices, one of them already opened. I picked it up and froze. It was a credit transfer slip. Dad's signature, but the recipient's name, Evan Quinn. The amount, $6,200. My stomach twisted. He'd done it again. When Dad returned that evening, I tried to talk to him gently. "Dad, have you been helping Evan financially?" He looked surprised. "How did you?" He stopped. "That's none of your concern, Hazel." "It is," I said firmly. "You know what happened last time. He promised to pay you back and never did." Dad's jaw tightened. "People make mistakes, he's trying." "No," I whispered. "He's manipulating you." He slammed his coffee cup down, startling me. "Enough, you're just jealous. Your brother is actually doing something with his life." I stood there in silence, my hands trembling. Jealous? Of what lies and debt? That night, I cried quietly in the laundry room. The dryer hummed beside me like an indifferent machine, echoing every thought I tried to suppress. Then something shifted. Through the thin wall, I heard Evan's voice again, muffled, urgent. "Yeah, he sent it, but I need more. I'll figure something out." I moved closer to the vent to hear better. He continued, "Relax, I got him wrapped around my finger. Dad thinks I'm applying for jobs. Idiot doesn't even know what the money for." My pulse spiked. There it was. Proof. I pressed my hand over my mouth to stop myself from gasping. He was stealing from Dad again and using it for something else. By morning, I had a plan. Not revenge, not yet. Just the truth. I started recording everything, the late-night calls, the times he left the house, the missing cash. Every lie went into my file. I even backed it up to the cloud, just in case. I wasn't sure what I was going to do with it yet, but I knew why I was doing it. Because sometimes the only way to be heard is to let the truth speak for you. A week later, things escalated. Dad called me into the living room, his expression cold. "Hazel, did you go through my mail?" I froze. "What?" "Evan told me you've been snooping around, that you don't trust this family." I stared at him. "He told you that?" Dad's voice rose. "Don't lie to me, you read private documents." Evan stood behind him, arms folded, pretending to look hurt. "I just wanted to protect you, Dad. She's been acting strange lately." The betrayal burned through my chest. I looked between them, father and son, and realized I was the outsider in my own home. "Fine," I said softly. "If you trust him so much, then trust this, you'll regret it." Then I walked out. No yelling, no tears, just quiet steps toward my tiny room. Because quiet doesn't mean weak. It means I was saving my strength for the right moment. Days passed in silence. Evan acted like he'd won. Dad avoided me. Mom tried to pretend everything was normal. But I knew something they didn't. The truth had a way of catching up. And it did. One afternoon, I came home early from a client meeting. As I opened the door, I heard voices, unfamiliar ones. Men's voices. Evan was in the living room with two strangers, passing around a small black bag. I hid behind the hallway wall, heart pounding. "I told you it's clean," Evan said. "The money's coming next week. My dad's sending more." The other man laughed darkly. "He better, or your little plan, over." My blood ran cold. This wasn't just borrowing money. This was something darker. That night, I confronted him. "What are you involved in, Evan?" He smirked. "You've been spying again." "I heard you. Who were those men?" He stepped closer, his tone sharp. "Stay out of my business, Hazel. You wouldn't understand." "Oh, I understand perfectly," I said quietly. "You're lying. Again. And this time, it's not just Dad's money you're risking, it's his trust, his safety." He laughed. "You think you can stop me? You don't even have your own room." He turned away, but I stopped him with one sentence. "I recorded everything." His body froze. "What did you say?" "I have recordings, messages, proof of your deals and your phone calls. If Dad doesn't believe me, the police will." For the first time, I saw fear flicker across his face. "Delete it," he hissed. I smiled faintly. "Not a chance." He stepped closer, his jaw tight. "You're bluffing." "Try me." He stormed out, slamming the door behind him. That night, I couldn't sleep. My laptop sat open beside me, the blue glow reflecting off the walls. Part of me wanted to send the files to Dad right then. But another part whispered, "Wait." Because sometimes revenge is better served cold and silent. The next morning, Dad looked uneasy. Evan was gone. His room empty. Mom stood by the window, wringing her hands. "He packed up and left last night," she said. "Didn't say a word." I didn't ask where. I already knew he wouldn't go far. For the first time, Dad looked lost. "Hazel," he said quietly, "did you say something to him?" I met his eyes. "No, Dad, I just stopped pretending." He looked down, maybe realizing what that meant. That evening, I sat in the laundry room one last time. The hum of the dryer felt almost peaceful now. It wasn't punishment anymore, it was survival. I opened my laptop, scrolled through the recordings, and smiled faintly. Each file, each word was a piece of the truth, waiting. Because I knew this wasn't over. Evan would come back. And when he did, I'd be ready. I stood in the doorway, frozen. My entire life, the books, sketches, memories, everything, reduced to cardboard boxes. And there he was, Evan, standing in the middle of my room, talking on the phone like it already belonged to him. "Yeah, bro, I'll send you the address. Got my own room here now," he said, his tone light, almost proud. I didn't even realize I was shaking until I heard my voice crack. "Evan, what is this?" He looked at me, eyebrows raised, like I was the one being unreasonable. "Oh, right. Dad said we'd switch rooms for a bit. You know, I need space, you're barely home anyway." Barely home. Those two words cut deeper than I wanted to admit. Because for me, this house was my home, the only thing that still felt like mine. "You mean Dad said?" I asked quietly. He shrugged. "Well, yeah, you're okay with it, right?" Before I could answer, Dad's voice echoed from the hall. "Hazel, you'll move your stuff to the laundry room for a few days. It's temporary." Temporary. Again, that cursed word. That night, I lay in the narrow laundry room, surrounded by detergent bottles and the steady hum of the washing machine. The air was damp. The single bulb flickered like it was struggling to breathe. It smelled of fabric softener and humiliation. I stared at the ceiling, wondering if this was how being invisible truly felt. Not hated, not ignored, just unseen. I opened my phone. One unread message from Lara, my closest friend. "Hazel, are you okay? Haven't seen you at the cafe in days." I hesitated, then typed, "Fine, just family stuff again." Her reply came seconds later. "You mean Evan again?" I smiled bitterly. She always knew. I didn't answer. The days blurred. Evan slept late, used my old desk for his laptop, blasted music, while I tried to work from the laundry room. Dad defended him like always. "Give him time, Hazel. He's just figuring things out." One night, I found Mom sitting on the stairs, her hands shaking around a mug of tea. "You don't have to accept this, Mom," I whispered. "He's your son too," she said softly. "But you're stronger than he is, Hazel. That's why it's easier for you to adjust." That line stuck with me. It's easier for you to adjust. It sounded like praise, but it was punishment disguised as love. 3 weeks passed. Temporary had become permanent. The laundry room was now officially mine. My bed, my work desk, my life wedged between a dryer and a wall. But one night, everything shifted. Evan threw a small party. Loud music, strangers in my house, laughter echoing through the walls. I stood by the laundry door, watching from the shadows as my father laughed with him, proud, like this was a celebration. That's when I saw it, Evan handing Dad a paper, a check. Dad's voice boomed. "I knew you'd pay it back one day." The guests clapped. I couldn't hear the rest, but I saw the smug look on Evan's face. That's when I realized it wasn't his money. It was mine. My freelance payment. The check I'd been waiting for, the one that never arrived. My name wasn't even on it anymore. Later that night, I confronted him. He didn't even flinch. "Oh, that. Dad said it was for family bills. I just used it to square things up." He smiled. "As the eldest, I handle family matters, right?" Something in me snapped that night, quietly, beautifully, completely. No shouting. No tears. Just a quiet decision. If they wanted to treat me like I didn't belong here, then maybe it was time they saw what happened and the quiet one finally stopped forgiving. Next morning, I smiled through breakfast. Evan joked, Dad laughed, Mom looked tired. Everything looked normal. But under that calm, I had already begun planning. I'd found my way out before. But this time, I wasn't just leaving. I was taking back everything they'd stolen, my space, my dignity, and my silence. Because silence was their favorite weapon. Now it was mine. Revenge doesn't always start with anger. Sometimes it begins with a calm cup of coffee and a decision. That morning, I woke before everyone else. The house was quiet. The air smelled of burnt toast and old resentment. I walked through the hallway and stopped outside Evan's room, my old room. The door was half open. He was still asleep, his phone glowing beside him. It buzzed every few seconds, messages from people asking for money. So the successful business story was a lie, again. I returned to the laundry room and opened my laptop. Freelance work wasn't just my job, it was my lifeline. Every project I'd completed was stored in cloud folders under my name. And the payments, all routed through the same joint family account Dad insisted we use for convenience. I'd trusted them. That trust was gone now. So I created a new account, separate, encrypted, private. New email, new ID, new start. For the first time, I didn't feel guilty for keeping a secret. That week, I worked harder than ever. Designs, clients, late nights. Every dollar went straight into the new account. No one noticed, they never did. But I noticed something else. Evan was growing restless. He started snooping around, asking Dad for more money, pretending to make calls about job interviews. One evening, I heard him on the porch. "Dad, she's not even helping much. She just hides in that laundry room." "She's doing her best," Mom whispered. "Her best? She's freeloading while I'm trying to get us back on track." Freeloading. That word echoed through my chest. I smiled to myself. Because soon, he'd learn what real freeloading felt like when his comfort came crashing down. 2 days later, I made my move. While everyone slept, I entered his room quietly. His laptop sat open, no password. Classic Evan, careless in confidence. I plugged in a drive, copied everything, emails, transactions, messages. It took less than 5 minutes. When I was done, I found something I didn't expect. A message thread titled "Investment Deal, Quinn Property." He was planning to sell Dad's name as collateral. Our family home. The one place still standing between me and nothing. That night, I sat outside, the cold air brushing against my skin. Mom came out, silent, holding a blanket. "You're not sleeping," she said. "Neither are you," I replied. She sat beside me. "Hazel, whatever you're thinking of doing, don't make it worse." "Worse," I laughed quietly. "It's already worse, Mom. I'm just balancing the scale." She didn't reply. Just looked at me like she could already sense the storm coming. The next morning, I printed the evidence, every email, every forged document. Then I called someone I hadn't spoken to in months. "Lara." She answered on the first ring. "Hazel, oh my God, I thought you vanished." "Not vanished," I said softly, "just reborn." I explained everything. The check, the room, the property scam. By the time I was done, Lara's tone had shifted from pity to fire. "He's not just selfish, Hazel. He's dangerous. You need to expose him." "I plan to," I said, "but not yet, not until he feels safe again." For the next few days, I acted normal. Smiled at breakfast, helped Dad with his garden. Even baked a pie, the one Evan liked. He didn't suspect a thing. Because that's the beauty of quiet revenge. It looks like peace until it strikes like lightning. I waited until Friday. Dad was hosting a small, family dinner to celebrate Evan's progress. He'd convinced Dad to invest $5,000 into a fake business account. But what Evan didn't know was that the account number was mine. I'd intercepted the form. Changed one digit. A single number, that's all it took. When the transfer went through, I watched Evan's face from across the table. He smiled proudly, thinking he'd won again. But inside my phone, a quiet notification buzzed. Deposit received, $5,000. That was the sound of poetic justice. I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate. I just looked at him and said softly, "You know, Evan, sometimes what you take from others doesn't belong to you, and sometimes it comes back in ways you never expect." He frowned, confused. But by the time he realized the truth, it would be too late. That night, I wrote in my journal. They put me in the laundry room because they thought I was easy to fold. But I'm not made of fabric. I'm made of steel. And for the first time in years, I slept without bitterness. Because revenge wasn't about making them suffer. It was about making myself free. The morning after the transfer, I woke up to silence. Not the painful kind that used to press against my chest, but a calm, almost sacred quiet, like the world had finally stopped arguing with me. Sunlight crept through the small laundry window, hitting the boxes stacked against the wall. Those boxes had been symbols of everything I'd lost. But today, they felt different. They felt like borders I'd outgrown. I made coffee, no rush, no tremor in my hands. For the first time, I didn't check my phone for approval or messages. No calls from clients, no emails from Dad, nothing from Evan. Just stillness. The kind that feels earned. Dad knocked on the laundry room door. "Hazel, breakfast." His voice sounded softer than usual. Not kind, exactly, but uncertain. I stepped out and saw him sitting at the table, newspaper folded neatly, untouched toast beside him. Mom stood by the counter, stirring tea that had already gone cold. And Evan, he wasn't there. "Where, Evan?" I asked, pretending not to know. Dad exhaled, rubbing his forehead. "He's gone, left before sunrise, said he needed space." That word again, space. Except this time, I didn't flinch. I just nodded. "Good," I said. "He always did take too much of it." Mom glanced up, her eyes glassy but quiet. "You're not angry." "Anger's heavy," I said simply. "I'm tired of carrying it." Later that day, I found his room, my room, almost empty. Drawers pulled out, mattress half stripped, a faint smell of his cologne lingering like a ghost refusing to leave. On the nightstand, a single piece of paper lay folded in half. "You win, Hazel." That was all it said. No apology, no explanation. Just that, and somehow it was enough. I smiled, not out of satisfaction but peace. Because revenge doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, and lets the silence finish the job. But peace is strange. It doesn't last long when you've spent your whole life surviving chaos. By evening, the house felt too quiet. No footsteps above, no loud music, no arguments echoing through the walls. Just the creak of wood and the hum of my thoughts. I wandered into the garden, barefoot, the grass cold under my feet. Dad was trimming the hedge, pretending to be busy. Mom sat on the porch steps, staring at the sky. I joined her. Neither of us spoke for a long time. Finally, she said, "Sometimes peace feels lonelier than pain, doesn't it?" I looked at her, surprised. She smiled faintly. "I always knew you were stronger than him, but strength, it isolates people." That night, I opened my laptop and logged into my new account. $5,000 sat there. Clean, honest, mine. But as the number glowed on the screen, something in me shifted. Revenge had restored my dignity, not my joy. So I opened another folder, dreams I forgot. Inside were sketches I'd made years ago. A small art studio by the sea, with big windows and walls covered in light. I'd drawn it when I still believed in fresh starts. Maybe it was time to believe again. The next morning, I packed a suitcase. Not out of anger, not escape, but evolution. Mom watched quietly as I zipped it shut. "Where will you go?" "I don't know yet," I smiled. "But wherever it is, I'll have a room that's mine." She nodded slowly, her eyes glistening. "You always did belong to yourself, Hazel. Maybe now you'll finally live like it." I hugged her, the kind of hug that says everything words can't. And as I walked out the front door, I realized something simple but powerful. Forgiveness wasn't weakness. It was release. The bus rolled past the neighborhood. I looked back at the house one last time, the walls that had held my silence, my anger, and finally my freedom. The laundry room window reflected the morning light, small and steady. And in that reflection, I saw myself, not the girl they folded away, but the woman who unfolded herself, quietly, beautifully, completely. They thought exile was punishment. But it was a door, and I just walked through it. 3 weeks had passed since Hazel left. The house had grown quiet, not peaceful quiet, but the kind that sounds like regret echoing through empty rooms. Dad stopped reading the paper. Mom stopped humming in the kitchen. Even the dog, Milo, waited by the door every evening as if she might walk in again. Evan returned one afternoon, carrying a duffel bag and a silence too heavy to name. He didn't knock, just walked straight to what used to be his room, the one Hazel had once called hers. When he opened the door, the first thing he noticed wasn't the emptiness. It was an envelope, folded neatly on the pillow. No name. Just the faint smell of Hazel's lavender hand cream. He hesitated for a long moment, before opening it. Dear whoever finds this, I used to believe home was a place. Walls, rooms, voices echoing down the hall. Now I know it's not. It's the one space where your soul doesn't shrink to fit someone else's comfort. If you're reading this, you've already crossed a line you can't uncross. Maybe you're curious, maybe you're guilty. Either way, I forgive you. Because forgiveness isn't about setting you free. It's about unlocking me. Hazel. Evan's throat tightened. He sank onto the edge of the bed, letter trembling in his hands. I didn't mean to, he whispered to no one. The words fell flat, swallowed by the same silence he'd once used against her. He looked around the empty walls, the faded outline where Hazel's art used to hang, the dusty corners she once kept spotless. Every inch of the room felt like an accusation. Dad stood quietly in the doorway. She left it for you, he said softly. Evan's eyes flicked up. You read it. Dad shook his head. No, she asked me not to stop you when you came back, said you needed to find your own truth. Evan's voice cracked. She hates me. Dad sighed. No, she just stopped needing you to understand her. That night, Evan couldn't sleep. He sat in the dark, staring at the letter until the ink blurred through his tears. Memories played in fragments. Hazel giving him her last cup of coffee. Hazel folding his laundry, even after he mocked her room. Hazel's quiet voice saying, You take too much space, Evan. He finally understood. She hadn't meant the room. She meant everything. Morning light crept in through the blinds. Evan picked up a pen and turned the letter over. On the back, he began to write slowly, painfully, honestly. Hazel, you were right. I took too much. Not because I needed it, but because I didn't know how to be small without disappearing. You gave me silence, and I filled it with noise. You gave me love, and I mistook it for weakness. I can't undo what I broke. But if you ever come back, the laundry room is yours again. Or maybe the whole house. Evan. He folded it, placed it back on the pillow, exactly where hers had been. Days turned into weeks. Hazel never returned, but something in the house began to shift. Mom started watering the plants again. Dad went back to fixing things instead of arguing about them. And Evan, he finally moved out, this time for real. He rented a small flat by the edge of town. No decorations, no noise, just quiet. And every night, he'd unfold Hazel's letter and read it once more, letting it remind him of the kind of peace he had stolen and the kind he still had to earn. Months later, a postcard arrived at the old house. No return address, just one line. The sea is louder than silence, but softer than regret. I'm okay. Mom framed it. Dad smiled faintly. And Evan, holding it in his hands, whispered, I'm glad you found your space, Hazel. I finally found mine too. The house had learned silence again. But this time, it did ache. It listened. Every creak of the floorboard, every soft whisper of wind through the curtains carried traces of Hazel. The way she used to hum while folding clothes, or open every window just to let the light breathe. Mom still kept Hazel's old mug by the sink, the one with the chipped rim. Dad still paused at the laundry door sometimes, his hand resting on the frame, like he was waiting for her voice to call him out again. The house didn't forget her. It remembered in small, stubborn ways. Miles away, in a coastal town where the air smelled of salt and rain, Hazel was learning how to live without waiting for permission. She rented a small studio above a cafe that played jazz in the evenings. Her mornings began with paint, not plans. Canvas after canvas, she poured out everything she couldn't say. Blue for silence, red for survival, white for peace. One of her paintings, Laundry Light, showed a small window with sunlight spilling across a floor. It sold within hours. The buyer had left a short note. It feels like home, thank you. Hazel smiled quietly. She didn't know that buyer was Evan. Meanwhile, back at the old house, Evan had changed. He worked longer hours, spoke softer, and listened more. Sometimes he'd sit outside the laundry window with a cup of tea, the same place he once mocked, and talk to the air as if Hazel could still hear him. "Guess what, sis?" he'd murmur. "Dad's cooking again. Burned half the pan, but we didn't argue this time." He laughed softly, a sound that hadn't existed before her silence. One evening, Mom received a brown envelope. No return name, just a faint smudge of paint on the corner. Inside was a photo, Hazel standing in front of her art studio, smiling like someone who finally belonged somewhere. And at the back of the photo, in Hazel's neat handwriting, it said, "Tell Dad I found a room full of light." Mom placed the photo on the mantel, right beside the family picture, the one Evan used to avoid looking at. But now, he looked at it every morning before leaving for work. Hazel didn't know that her letter had become a kind of scripture in that house. Dad would read it when guilt whispered too loud. Mom would touch it before sleeping. Evan would trace her handwriting with his thumb and whisper, "I hope the sea's still soft." Days turned into months. Hazel's art began to spread. Local magazines wrote about the woman who paints silence like it's alive. Her studio grew busier, her smile steadier. But some nights, when the wind howled against the windows, she'd still dream of that house. The sound of footsteps, her mother's half-whispered prayers, and the soft hum of the washing machine that once drowned her tears. She would wake up, sit by the window, and write in her journal. "You can forgive and still remember. You can heal and still ache. But you can't grow if you never leave." Evan, too, was growing slowly, painfully, but truly. He stopped trying to be the loudest in the room. Instead, he learned to build small furniture pieces, fixing things for neighbors, even volunteering at the shelter Hazel used to support. He told Mom once, "She taught me that space isn't about size, it's about respect." Mom smiled, tears gathering. "She'd be proud," she said. And for the first time, Evan believed her. By the time spring came, the house felt lighter. Windows open, curtains swaying, laughter returning in soft echoes. It wasn't the same, it was better, because it had learned from its silence. And somewhere, in a small coastal studio, Hazel painted another canvas, this one of a house standing beneath morning light. On the window, a faint reflection of a woman smiling back. It started with a letter, folded once, sealed without a name, and slipped under Hazel's studio door on a rainy night. She almost didn't notice it. The envelope was damp, edges curled like it had traveled through storms. Inside, a short note, written in a handwriting she hadn't seen in months. "Sometimes, silence teaches us what words destroy. I found your sketchbook in the attic. You drew us all, even when we didn't deserve it." She froze. For a long minute, the only sound in the room was rain against glass and the slow ticking of the wall clock. Evan. The name felt different now. Less like a wound, more like an echo returning home. That night, Hazel didn't paint. She sat by the window, the letter in her lap, the sea roaring in the distance. Her thoughts drifted between past and peace, between the girl she used to be and the woman she was becoming. She whispered to the wind, "Maybe this is what healing sounds like, not words, just understanding." The waves didn't answer. But for the first time, she didn't need them to. Back at the house, Evan couldn't sleep. The room still remembered her voice, soft, sure, stubborn. He stood in front of the laundry door, the bulb above flickering just like it used to. He imagined her laughter echoing in that narrow space, the way she'd fold her clothes with quiet grace. And he realized he never saw how much strength lived in silence. On the table lay another unfinished letter, the one he never sent. "Hazel, I used to think being loud made me right. But you proved me wrong every time you stayed quiet and still won. The money, the room, the pride, I don't want any of it. I just want to be someone you wouldn't hide from." He folded it, tucked it inside her old sketchbook, and placed it by the window. as if the house itself might deliver it to her. The next morning, Mom found the sketchbook. "Are you sending this to her?" she asked. Evan shook his head. "She doesn't need words, she already knows." But later that evening, he changed his mind. He wrapped it carefully, added a small note. "To the girl who painted the light in every dark room," and mailed it. Weeks passed. Hazel opened the parcel one quiet afternoon. Her old sketchbook, worn, faded, and filled with pieces of a girl who had refused to disappear. And between the pages, she found the letter. Her eyes softened as she read the final line. "You were never invisible. We just refused to look." Tears slipped silently. But they weren't heavy this time. They felt clean. Hazel placed the letter on her studio wall, right above her desk. Every morning after that, she'd look at it before painting. Not as a reminder of pain, but proof that some people do change, if given the silence to hear themselves. Back home, the house seemed lighter again. Dad started planting flowers near the porch. Mom began humming old songs while making breakfast. And Evan, he volunteered to repaint the laundry room. He chose a color Hazel used to love, pale blue. When the sunlight hit it, it looked like forgiveness. One evening, as Hazel locked her studio, she caught a glimpse of the sea, gold, and soft beneath the setting sun. She smiled and whispered, "We're all just learning how to come home, aren't we?" And somewhere, miles away, in a house with fresh blue walls and open windows, it was a quiet Sunday morning. The sea outside Hazel's studio shimmered in pale gold. Waves brushing against the rocks like old memories, returning in whispers. She stood by the window, a mug of black coffee in her hands, watching sunlight crawl across her sketches pinned to the wall. Each one told a story, not of pain anymore, but of transformation. The lines were softer now, the colors warmer. Her art had finally learned how to breathe again. And yet, there was something missing. Something she couldn't quite name. That's when the knock came. 3 slow, deliberate taps against the wooden door. Not urgent, not casual. Just enough to freeze her where she stood. Her heartbeat quickened. No one ever visited without calling first. She set the mug down, wiped her palms against her jeans, and opened the door. It was Evan. It wasn't her parents. It was a stranger, a tall man in his early 30s, raincoat soaked. Eyes tired but kind. "Hazel Quinn?" he asked softly. "Yes." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a sealed envelope. "This was left at our law office, no return address. They said it was for you, personally." She frowned, accepting it. "Who sent it?" The man shook his head. "No name, just this symbol." He turned the envelope around. And there, pressed in dark blue wax, was a small emblem. A feather wrapped around a key. Hazel's stomach dropped. She'd seen that symbol before. On Evan's old notebook, the one he kept locked in the drawer when they were kids. She looked up, but the man had already stepped back. "Have a good day, Miss Quinn." And with that, he walked away, leaving only the echo of rain and the weight of curiosity behind. Hazel carried the envelope to her desk and stared at it. Her fingers hovered above the seal for a long moment before breaking it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper, handwritten in a script both familiar and trembling. "Hazel, if you're reading this, I don't know if I'll ever get to explain. I didn't leave because I wanted space. I left because I had to. There's something you never knew about Dad. And I need you to find the truth before it's too late." Her breath caught. The words blurred as her eyes filled with tears she didn't expect. Not anger. Not grief. Something in between, the heavy, suspended ache of unfinished stories. She sat there for a while, staring at the paper until the ink almost felt alive. Then she noticed it. A faint smudge near the bottom corner, like something had been erased. She held the paper to the light. And faintly, another line revealed itself. Check the attic. Her heart skipped a beat. The attic. The one she hadn't seen since the night she left home. The one Evan used to hide in when their parents fought. For a long time, Hazel just sat still. The sound of the sea faded behind her. Even the clock seemed to stop. Then she stood, grabbed her coat, and drove. The drive back to her old house was long and quiet. Every mile felt like a memory being replayed. The laughter, the arguments, the birthday that no one came to. But now, those memories didn't hurt. They just existed, like old photographs you can finally look at without shaking. When she arrived, the front gate creaked just like it always had. The garden was overgrown. The porch light was off. And the house, though smaller than she remembered, still held the same haunting kind of silence. She knocked once before stepping inside. Mom. No answer. Dust floated in the air. The faint smell of paint and detergent lingering like ghosts of routine. She walked through the hallway slowly, her hand brushing over the walls that once heard her cry. Then she reached the attic ladder. Still there. Still creaky. She climbed. The attic smelled of time. Wood, paper, and faint traces of old perfume. Sunlight filtered through the tiny window. Dust particles dancing in golden swirls. In the corner, covered under a sheet, was a stack of boxes labeled in Dad's handwriting. Bills, photos, letters. She knelt down, pulling one open. Receipts, old bank statements. Nothing unusual until she found an envelope with her name. Not her current name. Her childhood handwriting, clumsy and small. To Hazel from Dad, do not open yet. Her fingers trembled. She unfolded the letter inside. My little girl, if you're reading this, you're old enough to see me as more than just your father. I made mistakes with money, with choices, with love. I wanted to protect you and your brother, but I ended up dividing you. The house, the arguments, the favoritism, they weren't about love. They were about guilt. Evan wasn't strong enough to carry it, and I made you believe you had to. But the truth is, I trusted you more than I should have. You were my balance. And I'm sorry I made you feel small so he could feel safe. Hazel's lips parted, but no words came. Her chest ached, the kind of ache that lives deep. Not from anger, but understanding. She kept reading. If anything ever happens to me, don't let anger be your inheritance. Let peace be your rebellion. And tell your brother, I forgave him long before he ever asked. By the time she finished, her tears had already fallen onto the paper, softening the ink, turning words into waves. She sat there for a long time, in the same attic that once felt suffocating, now feeling like it was breathing with her. Maybe this was what Evan wanted her to find. Not money, not secrets, but truth, the kind that rewrites the story you thought you knew. She folded both letters, Dad's and Evan's, and placed them inside her bag. As she turned to leave, her gaze fell on one more thing, a small, unfinished canvas, hidden behind a box. It was a painting of a girl sitting by the sea, sketchbook on her knees, a laundry room window behind her. Dad had painted it, and though the brushstrokes were rough, the message was clear. He saw her. He always had. As Hazel climbed down the ladder, she felt lighter, but not empty. Forgiveness had changed shape. It wasn't about forgetting. It was about finally seeing what love looked like through its cracks. She stepped outside, the evening sky glowing with soft pink clouds. A quiet smile played on her lips. You were wrong, Dad, she whispered. Peace isn't rebellion. It's the reward. The wind rustled the trees as if answering her. And somewhere far away, a blue-painted laundry room caught the sunset. And for a fleeting moment, it looked like home again. The days that followed felt like pages of a book slowly turning themselves. Hazel no longer lived in the echo of her past. She was shaping a new rhythm, one heartbeat at a time. Her art studio by the sea was small but alive. Every wall told a story, paint splattered, sunlit, and beautifully imperfect. The windows opened to waves crashing against the rocks, as if nature itself was applauding her quiet resilience. And every morning, before the world woke up, Hazel would sit by the window with her sketchbook, coffee steaming beside her, and draw. Sometimes faces she remembered, sometimes ones she imagined, but every sketch carried a pulse of forgiveness hidden between the lines. One afternoon, as she was cleaning the brushes, a knock echoed on the door. Her heart froze. No one ever came unannounced here. When she opened it, a familiar face stood there, Harper, her childhood friend, the only one who had ever believed in her voice. They hadn't spoken since the chaos began. "Hazel Quinn," Harper smiled nervously, holding out a small brown envelope. "I told myself I'd only come if I knew you were finally free." Hazel blinked in surprise. "Free?" Harper nodded. "Yes, from them, from him." They hugged, the kind that rewinds years of distance in one heartbeat. When Harper stepped back, she handed her the envelope. "It's from your brother." Hazel didn't open it right away. The weight of it sat on her table, like a storm waiting to be read. Later that night, she finally tore it open. The handwriting was uneven, rushed, raw. "Hazel, you were right about everything. About me, about Dad, about what family means. I thought you were the problem. Turns out, I was the reflection of everything I refused to fix. I'm leaving the city, not running, just rebuilding. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that the money, the room, the chaos, none of it feels like victory anymore. You once said, we're all just mirrors trying not to break. Well, I finally shattered, and maybe that's how I start to see clearly. If you ever open your studio, keep one wall empty. Maybe one day I'll paint beside you. Evan." Hazel's eyes blurred before she reached the last line. She folded the letter and placed it in her journal, not as a wound, but as a seed. The next morning, the sea was loud. The wind carried salt and a strange calm, the kind that follows after storms. Hazel walked along the shoreline, barefoot again, waves brushing her ankles. She thought about the letter, not in pain, but gratitude. Because sometimes closure doesn't come in grand apologies. It comes in the quiet honesty of someone who finally sees what they broke. Weeks passed. Hazel began teaching small art classes to children from nearby towns, kids who had stories in their eyes, but didn't yet have words to tell them. She taught them how to feel through colors. "Don't paint what you see," she'd say softly. "Paint what you can't say." And as she watched their tiny hands move across the canvas, Hazel realized she was doing the same, healing, word by word, color by color. One evening, as she closed up the studio, she found a note taped to the window. No name, no signature, just a few words scribbled in blue ink. "The room looks alive again. I'm proud of you." She smiled. Maybe it was from Evan. Maybe it was from someone else. Maybe it didn't matter. What mattered was that the universe had started speaking to her again, not through conflict, but through quiet signs of peace. That night, Hazel lit a candle in her studio, a ritual she had begun for herself. Not for prayer, not for memory, but for presence. The flame flickered, reflected in her sketches, and for the first time in years, she whispered aloud, "I forgive us all." Her voice cracked mid-sentence, but it didn't matter. Because forgiveness wasn't meant to be perfect, only real. The camera of life panned out slowly. The sea beyond her window, shimmering under the moonlight. The sketch of a new dawn on her easel. And a woman finally at peace with both her shadows and her light. Revenge burned the pain away. Forgiveness lit what remained. The sea had become her clock. Each wave marked another hour of peace Hazel never thought she'd earn. 6 months had passed since Evan's letter, 6 months of still mornings, slow evenings, and quiet purpose. Her studio was alive now, not just with paintings, but with people. Locals dropped by to buy sketches, kids came after school to learn, and tourists stopped to take pictures of the woman who painted silence. They didn't know her story. They just saw the light that had survived it. Hazel stood by the open window, her hair brushing against the salty wind. On the easel before her was a half-finished painting, a horizon split between storm and sunlight. It wasn't just art, it was memory. Her phone buzzed. A message from Harper. "Big news. Someone wants to feature your work in the London Art Revival show. You in?" Hazel stared at the message for a long time. London, the city she once ran from. The city where her silence began. "Maybe it's time," she whispered. That night, she sat outside the studio, watching lanterns glow over the water. She remembered her mother's voice. "You always did belong to yourself, Hazel." Those words had become her prayer. But belonging to yourself isn't always peaceful. Sometimes it means facing the places where you lost yourself first. So she said yes. To the show. To the city. To the part of her story that still waited to be rewritten. A week later, she boarded a train to London, suitcase beside her, sketchbook in her lap. The rhythmic sound of tracks below felt almost like a heartbeat. Every station passed, like a memory she'd already lived. At one point, a small girl sitting across from her asked, "Are you an artist?" Hazel smiled. "I try to be." The child tilted her head. "Do you paint happy things?" Hazel looked down at the sketch in her hand, a wave breaking over a dark rock. "I paint truth," she said softly. "Sometimes that's happy." The girl grinned, as if she understood, and went back to her coloring book. Hazel watched her for a while, realizing something simple yet profound. Children don't fear color, adults do. When the train reached London, the air felt heavier. The city smelled the same, metal, rain, and memory. The gallery was in an old building near the Thames. Glass ceilings, soft lighting, and walls that whispered 1,000 stories at once. Hazel's section was small but distinct, 4 paintings and 1 sketch. The sketch was her most personal, the laundry room window, sunlight sneaking in through dusty glass. She titled it, "Freedom Has Small Windows." The curator, a calm woman in her 40s, approached with admiration. "Your work," she said, "feels honest, like grief that learned to breathe." Hazel smiled politely, though her chest tightened. That's what healing feels like, beauty that still remembers the pain. The show began. People walked past her paintings, whispering, analyzing, smiling. Hazel didn't say much, she just observed. Then she noticed him. At first, she thought her mind was playing tricks. But no, it was Evan. He stood across the room, looking at Freedom Has Small Windows. His hair shorter, his face leaner, older perhaps, but clearer. He didn't notice her yet. He was too busy looking at the art. When he finally turned, their eyes met. Neither moved. Time, for the first time, didn't hurt. Later, after most people had left, he approached quietly. "Didn't think you'd actually say yes to a public show." Hazel gave a half-smile. "Didn't think you'd actually show up." He shrugged, awkward but sincere. "I saw the poster online. I figured I owed it to the girl who once painted stars on her bedroom ceiling." That memory hit her like sunlight, pure, unguarded, innocent. Before the anger, before the distance. "You look peaceful," Evan said. "I am," she replied simply. "Are you?" He hesitated. "I'm getting there. I've been helping at a youth rehab center in Leeds. Kids who remind me too much of myself." Hazel's eyes softened. "That sounds like a start." He nodded. "It's weird. The more I help them, the more I understand you." They walked outside together. The city lights shimmered on the river, and for the first time, they weren't strangers. Evan pulled a folded piece of paper from his jacket. "This was supposed to be another letter, but I figured I should say it face to face this time." He paused. "I'm sorry, Hazel. Not for the money. Not even for taking your room. I'm sorry for making you believe you were small when you were the strongest one among us." The air between them thickened, not with tension but with truth. Hazel took a slow breath. "I forgave you a long time ago," she said. "I just didn't know I'd ever get to say it out loud." He looked down, smiling faintly. "Guess we both needed silence to learn how to listen." They stood there for a while, two broken mirrors, finally reflecting light the same way. When they parted, there were no promises, no dramatic goodbyes. Just understanding, the rarest kind of closure. The next morning, Hazel walked along the Thames, sketchbook in hand. She drew the city skyline, not perfect, not clean, but alive. And beneath it, she wrote, "Some stories don't end, they just breathe differently." When she returned to her studio weeks later, she found a package waiting at her doorstep. Inside was a small wooden frame, hand-carved, delicate. Inside it, a note. "For your next painting, from your brother who finally found his own window." Hazel smiled. It wasn't just a gift. It was a full circle. She placed the frame on her table and began to paint again. Only this time, she didn't start with darkness. She started with light, warm, golden, endless. And as her brush touched the canvas, the world outside her studio felt wider than ever before. Because Hazel had finally learned the truest thing about freedom. It isn't about running away. It's about staying, creating, forgiving, and still daring to dream. Peace isn't a place you find. It's the home you build inside yourself. The sea was calmer that morning, almost unnaturally still. The kind of stillness that feels like a breath held by the universe itself. Hazel stood in her studio, barefoot, paintbrush in hand, the smell of salt and turpentine in the air. The light came in soft streaks through the window, warming her face. On the table beside her lay Evan's wooden frame, waiting patiently, as if it already knew what it would hold. 6 months had passed since the London show. The world had opened up in ways she never expected. Her story, though never told directly, had spread quietly through her art. People wrote to her from across the world. A woman in Dublin who'd left an abusive marriage. A teenager in Canada learning to stand up to her family. An elderly man in New York who hadn't painted in 30 years, but picked up a brush again after seeing her work. Hazel read their messages every morning, not for validation, but connection. Each story felt like a reflection of her own pain, reshaped into something kinder. Maybe, she thought, healing isn't personal, maybe it's contagious. That day, she began painting her final piece for the year, the last canvas. The concept had come to her in a dream. A woman standing before a broken wall, painting sunlight where the cracks used to be. As the brush moved, she felt time dissolve. Every color she laid down, golden, pale blue, soft ivory, felt like a word in a prayer she didn't know she was saying. The world outside faded. Only the sound of the ocean and the gentle stroke of her brush remained. She painted until evening, when the last rays of light turned the studio amber. Then she stepped back and froze. Because she wasn't just looking at a painting. She was looking at herself. The woman in the canvas had her face, but older, wiser, lighter. Her eyes held peace that Hazel had only begun to understand. Tears welled up, uninvited but pure. Not sadness, release. That night, she sat by the sea, the wind brushing her skin like a familiar ghost. The stars shimmered above, quiet witnesses to her transformation. She whispered to the water, "You took my fear, you gave me silence, and in silence I found my name again." A small wave reached her feet, as if answering back. Hazel smiled. The next morning, she woke early to deliver the last canvas to a local exhibition in town. It wasn't a big event, just a community art day in a converted barn by the docks. Children were painting outside, their laughter echoing against the water. Hazel placed her painting on a stand near the window. No signature this time, just a small card that read, for anyone who has ever been made to feel small. As people wandered through, a little boy stopped in front of the painting. He couldn't have been more than 7. He stared at it for a long time, then tugged his mother's sleeve. "Mom, look," he said. She fixed the wall with light. Hazel's heart swelled. That one sentence, so innocent, so true, felt like the perfect review of her entire life. Later that evening, as the sun began to set, Hazel returned to her studio. She brewed tea, opened her journal, and began to write. "Dear future me, if you ever forget how far you've come, look at the sea. Remember that you built peace with your own hands, stroke by stroke, breath by breath. You are not what they took from you. You are what you chose to rebuild." She paused, smiling to herself. Her handwriting had steadied, no tremor, no hesitation. That in itself was a miracle. A knock at the door broke the silence. It was Harper, her best friend from London. "Still awake," she grinned. Hazel laughed, "Barely tea." "Always." They sat together by the window, the sea stretching endlessly before them. "You know," Harper said, "you've built something rare, a life without noise." Hazel nodded. It took losing everything to hear what peace sounds like. Harper sipped her tea thoughtfully. "So what's next? You're not done, are you?" Hazel chuckled. "No, just changing mediums." "Meaning?" "Meaning, maybe it's time to teach, to help others paint their silence into color." Harper smiled. "You'd be amazing at that." Weeks turned into months. The art school opened quietly, the window studio. No grand announcement, no press. Just a wooden sign, a wide door, and walls that breathed freedom. Hazel taught in the mornings, painted in the afternoons, and watched sunsets in the evenings. Her students came from everywhere, locals, travelers, even a few who'd read about her story online. They didn't come for art. They came for peace. One day, a woman in her 50s stayed after class. She stood silently before Hazel's painting, the last canvas. Then she turned, eyes wet, and whispered, "Thank you. I didn't know forgiveness could look like this." Hazel didn't reply. She just nodded, feeling the weight of the moment settle softly between them. That night, as Hazel locked up, she looked around the studio one last time. The smell of paint, the laughter from earlier, the faint hum of the sea outside, it all felt alive. She turned off the lights, leaving only the glow of the last canvas illuminated under the moonlight. In the quiet, she spoke to herself. You were never meant to disappear. You were meant to begin again, louder, brighter, freer. Years passed. Her name began to appear in small galleries across Europe, not because she sought fame, but because her art spoke. Critics called her the painter of silence. But those who truly understood knew she wasn't painting silence. She was painting survival. Her story became part of whispered conversations, not sensational, but sacred. People said she'd turned pain into a language the world could feel. And she had. One winter morning, much later, Hazel sat by the same window, now streaked with frost. She held a letter in her hand, an invitation to an international art exhibit in Paris. It was titled The Human Spirit, Resilience Through Art. She smiled softly, folded the letter, and set it aside. Paris could wait. She looked instead at the ocean, still, infinite, forgiving. And on the wall before her hung the last canvas. Except something had changed. The paint had cracked slightly with time, small, delicate fractures. But instead of ruining it, the cracks made the light shimmer even more. Hazel laughed quietly. Guess even art grows old beautifully. That evening, she wrote one last journal entry. Everything ends, but not everything fades. The sea still breathes, the light still returns. And I am finally home. She signed her name, Hazel Quinn, and closed the book gently. Outside, the tide rolled in and out, endless and kind. And in that rhythm of waves, of color, of forgiveness, Hazel's story finally found its full stop. Or maybe just a new beginning. when the world pushed her into the smallest room. She built a universe inside it and called it peace.